morning, good afternoon, good evening. The tragic events in Tanzania are so important, not only for Tanzania, but the whole of Africa. Ever since many African countries have started emerging from colonial rule, we have had endless political instability. Many African countries have yet to come up with a stable political system. Some countries have succeeded in doing it, but many have not. The issue of good governance has not been dealt with properly. Tanzania was fairly stable ever since the time of President Julius Mwalimu Nyerere. He was a visionary. But nonetheless, he must be turning in his grave when he sees what has happened to that country. It has not been spared the same political instability and endless fighting over power that has happened in other African countries. The violence that took place in Tanzania following the recent elections is something that every African out there should hold their head in shame. For those of you who may not have seen some of the videos that have taken place, here is one of the videos showing the swearing in ceremony.
Fursa kwa wananchi kueleza matakwa yao ya aina ya viongozi wanaodhani wataweza kuwatumikia vyema na kuwaletea maendeleo endelevu. Kipindi cha kampeni tuligawika kiitikadi na kishabiki kama taifa, ila baada ya uchaguzi kufanyika, anayechaguliwa na wengi huwa ndio chaguo la nchi na anapaswa kuwa mtumishi wa wananchi wote waliomchagua na waliochagua wagombea wengine na hata ambao hawakushiriki uchaguzi. Kwa sisi tuliochaguliwa, ahadi yetu kwenu wananchi ni kulitumikia taifa hili kwa nguvu zetu zote, vipawa vyetu vyote na maarifa yetu yote. Ndugu zangu wa Tanzania, ni vyema tutambue kwa uchaguzi mkuu wa viongozi wa serikali ni mchakato wa msimu mmoja tu ndani ya kipindi cha miaka 5. Muda mwingine wote maisha lazima yaendelee. Hivyo basi jukumu letu sote kwa pamoja ni kujenga nchi yetu na kuifanya kesho yetu iwe bora zaidi kuliko jana yetu. Niwasihi tuendelee kuilinda itikadi yetu ya umoja na mshikamano. Ndugu zangu, wote tunaitakia mema nchi hii, tumesikitishwa na kuhuzunishwa na matukio ya uvunjifu wa amani, upotevu wa maisha na uharibifu wa mali za umma na mali za watu binafsi kwenye baadhi ya maeneo hapa nchini, hasa kwenye majiji na miji. Kilichotokea hakiendani na taswira na sifa za Kitanzania na sio Utanzania. Haikutushangaza kuona kuwa baadhi ya vijana waliokamatwa kutokana na kadhia hiyo wametoka nje ya Tanzania. Vyombo vyetu vya ulinzi na usalama vinaendelea kufuatilia na kuchunguza kwa undani zaidi kilichotokea.
The tragedy is that the violence caused a lot of destruction. Property was destroyed and many lives were lost. According to some reports, up to 800 people were killed. Revised reports are coming in that even more people were killed. The African Union has condemned the election process. And one hopes that it is going to follow this up and deny this regime legitimacy. The people of Tanzania need to bite the bullet and come up with a solution, a working solution that will end the country's problems. The violence that took place, I think many people would have said they saw it coming. Tanzania, like many other African countries in SADC, including countries like Zimbabwe, have not tolerated a real, healthy and functioning democratic system of government. That is at the heart of their problem. Tanzania is not a democracy. Tanzania has had the same problem that Zimbabwe has had. It has been in all but a de facto one-party state. That has been the problem with Tanzania. And the price that nation has paid is what we are seeing now. Tanzania has been ruled by the same party since the country's independence, over 60 years ago. And the prospects of losing power when you've been in power for that long can drive some people to do anything. I think what we witnessed in Tanzania is one such case. These people were trying to hang on to power at all costs. Some reports said, and we have seen videos of Tanzanian army soldiers driving among the people, the demonstrators, the protesters. They'd refused to shoot their own people. And according to some reports, the president of Tanzania brought in mercenaries from Uganda. And they are the ones who were responsible for the many lives lost during those protests. The very fact that foreigners were brought in goes to show that this process could not be the democratic wish of the people of Tanzania. The government that is in office now is not accountable to the people of Tanzania. And I think SADC the AU and SADC, because Tanzania is part of SADC, should step in and really help the people of Tanzania sort out this problem. What lessons are there to be learned? I think there are many lessons for both Tanzania and countries like ourselves, Zimbabwe. We should learn from this. Zimbabwe has had its own share of violent elections. We only know too well what happened in 2008. And if we thought the formation of the GNU was going to sort out our problems and end that case, we were wrong. Because the GNU failed to implement even one token reform. And so we ended up at the end of the GNU with the same corrupt and incompetent Zanu PF in power. The lesson to be learned by the people of Tanzania is that if they should go into a GNU, they must insist in that the people in that government of national unity are truly visionaries who are committed to implementing the democratic reforms and get the country back on a democratic footing. They must not repeat the same mistakes that the people of Zimbabwe made, where at the end of the GNU, not even one token reform had been implemented. Why? Well, Mugabe bribed Morgan Tsvangirai, Atham Tambara, and their MDC friends with the trappings of high office. The E-class limousines for all the deputy ministers, the two deputy prime ministers, and Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai himself, plus the generous salaries and allowances all round. And for Morgan Tsvangirai, the $4 million mansion in Highlands. And with their snouts in the feeding trough, the MDC guys forgot about implementing reforms. So at the end of the GNU, not even one token reform had been implemented. And so the country found itself back to square one. The people of Tanzania should learn from us. They should not repeat that mistake. I think we had the misfortune in Zimbabwe of having in Mugabe and his Zanu PF thugs founding fathers who had no vision. Unlike Botswana's founding fathers or South Africa's founding fathers, Robert Mugabe and these cronies had paid lip service to one man, one vote. As the country moved closer and closer towards independence, Robert Mugabe and company realized that they wanted absolute power. They wanted a one-party state. And they were determined to get it. As much as the Lancaster House Constitution was a multi-party democracy, in reality, Mugabe and company wanted a one-party state. And hence the reason why the Lancaster House agreement was that all freedom fighters should be withdrawn from the field to allow for free, fair, and credible elections. Mugabe and company saw to it that they did not withdraw their men. Some of the Zanu PF operatives were left in the field during the campaign period, and their instruction was to tell the people that if Zanu PF does not win the elections, the bush war would continue. Needless to say, of course, that the people voted to end the bush war. As soon as Zanu PF got their feet under the desk, they sought to consolidate their hold on power and launch the Kukurawundi. The primary purpose of the Kukurawundi was to consolidate Zanu PF's hold on power by forcing the only other political party in the country that posed a serious challenge to Zanu PF's APU, led by the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo. PF's APU relented in 1987 and signed the Unit Accord. And over 20,000 people it died in the so-called Kukurawundi massacre. And ever since, with the signing of the Unit Accord, it cleared the way for Mugabe to impose the de facto one-party state. Zimbabwe has never held free, fair, and credible elections. The nearest time we came to holding free, fair, and credible elections was in 2008, when SADC, in response to the barbarism of Zanu PF, beating up of opposition leaders in 2007, they forced Zanu PF to implement some reforms, making it possible to have meaningful, free, fair, and credible elections. And those elections, the people, for the first time, had the opportunity to really vote for who they wanted. And they did. And as the results started coming in, Zanu PF realized that they had lost those elections. And the two men who today occupy the office of the president and the vice president, Mnangagwa and Chiwenga, stepped in and conducted the electoral coup of 2008. Here is Dr. Ibo Mandaza speaking about that electoral coup.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat in 2008. He phoned Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. And Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, and I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns, was prepared to go. His wife was seen to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, "You stay where you are." And then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. A committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that took the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth.
I think Africa, we have to bite the bullet and sort out this problem of bad governance. Countries like Zimbabwe have now been independent for 45 years, and we still cannot hold free, fair, and credible elections. It is a crying shame. What is so difficult about coming up with a solution to our own problems? We have had rigged elections again and again. 2023, Mnangagwa blatantly rigged those elections. Both SADC and the AU election observers condemned those elections as flawed and illegal. And soon after the rigged elections, Mnangagwa came out and was boasting that he doesn't care what those people were saying. He insisted that he'd won those elections.
Zanu PF kana ndonyanyisa kufara zvakanaka ukavona vavengi vakwashi kurumbidza nekuchikanganisa ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa farai, you are doing great things for your country. Homu takaita maelections edu kuna vamwe vaitection anafamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
The truth of the matter is, the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections is at the very heart of why Zimbabwe is a pariah state, a failed state, why we are haunted by political instability, to say nothing of the rampant corruption and criminal waste of human and material resources. We've often complained of exploitation by outsiders, but as long as we remain politically weak, easily divided, this will continue. The whole issue in Zimbabwe right now is focusing on this ED 2030. We are doing nothing to implement the democratic reforms to ensure that the next election, 2028, are either free, fair, and credible, or we do not participate, because that has been one of our problems. We've participated in flawed elections, knowing fully well that if you participate, you give the process legitimacy. There is a real danger that this ED 2030 agenda is the excuse the opposition has been waiting for to justify participating in 2028 with not even one token reform implemented. We'll be lucky that Zanu PF will rig the elections and we do not have a repeat of what we saw in 2018, for instance, when there were protests and many people were killed. Not as many as in 2008 or as many as in Mozambique. But nonetheless, the election and post-elections were marred by violence. What has happened in Tanzania should be a stark reminder to all of us in Africa, that we must sit down and sort out this problem, the case of rigged elections and bad time in the wheel. We already know the various forms of systems of government out there. All we need is to accept that none of us have the divine right to rule. We should have a system that allows everyone to have a meaningful say in the governance of democracy. It will be a pity for countries like Zimbabwe that will go into 50 years after independence and we still cannot hold free, fair, and credible elections. That's a whole generation in this day and age. And we still are failing to come up with a political system that allows meaningful, democratic debate and democratic discourse. Governing ourselves has been at the heart of the failure to govern ourselves, has been at the heart of why we are a failed state. We really need to sit up and put an end to this. And in conclusion, I really would like to wish the people of Tanzania the best of luck. That you sit down and finally come up with a political system that will guarantee political stability in that country. It is a pity that Tanzania has had to go through all this. But make sure it doesn't happen ever again. So my most important advice is that the people of Tanzania must demand that whoever comes in to form this government of national unity, they are truly committed to implementing the democratic reforms, to reform the institutions, so that the democratic wish of the people from henceforth is recognized. Political instability in Tanzania was caused because those in power were seeking to undermine the democratic wish of the people. Enough is enough. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.